Mother Teresa used to say, if you can't feed 100 people, then just feed one.
Ever since the beginning of the first human civilization, humans have sought food all over the world. People in Ethiopia and Sudan have gone through conflict and war as countries started to fight for independence in the mid 1900s.
After gaining independence, political powers struggled and competed for control, which eventually led to conflict, war, and genocide, which means the purposeful killing of an ethnic or cultural group.
As governments and political powers began to lose sight of its people, people started going hungry, and as the number of people in need started to increase, famine took place. First of all, what is famine? According to Cambridge English Dictionary, a famine is a situation where there is not enough food for a great number of people, causing illness and death, or a particular period when this happens.
There has been a serious famine in Ethiopia and Sudan. People have been suffering due to not only killing casualties but also from conflict. For example, there have been a severe religious conflict in the First Sudanese War and the Sudanese Genocide, when Britain and Egypt first decided to favor the northern part of Sudan, where most Muslims lived, over the southern part of Sudan, where most Christians lived.
Since the early 1900s, and still up till today, there is ongoing conflict. As much as conflict needs to be recognized, famine is also a serious problem.
What has caused famine in Ethiopia and Sudan?
Among the many factors that have caused famine in Sudan and Ethiopia, we have chosen three causes specifically: war and conflict, severe drought, and lack of international aid and response. Firstly, war and conflict have been partially responsible for the famine in Sudan and Ethiopia. Since 1983, in Sudan, more than 2 million people have died in fighting and war-induced famines in Sudan in the struggle between the Islamic government in the north and autonomy-seeking groups in the largely animist and Christian south. At around 1980s to 1990s, the total population in Sudan was approximately 20 million. About one-tenth of the population, which is a considerable portion of the whole population, has died due to conflict and war-induced famines. With such a huge casualty of as much as one-tenth of a population dead, it is difficult for women, children, the elderly, and the ill, who are probably the ones remaining from the war, to grow crops and feed the entire population in place of the men who have died or have been injured from the war and genocide.
Despite an August peace deal designed to bring an end to South Sudan's civil war, that country's future remains just as uncertain. It began as a conflict between two rival sides of the government and army, both of which split into along ethnic lines as a struggle for power, which ultimately exploded at the end of 2013. Fighting continues in some areas, and progress on the key element of the peace deal has been glacial. Ongoing fighting is not only preventing the return of people to their homes and fields, but also hampering the delivery of aid and any reliable assessment of the severity of hunger crisis. War can have a negative effect on delivery on aid, thus resulting in the late delivery of aid, which ultimately leads to slow distribution of food, which then causes famine.
So in my view, generally famines, especially in the modern age, tend to be political failures more than anything else. While you do get crop failures and droughts, if the nation is in some way properly managed, even if it doesn't have a whole lot of resources, they can usually figure out how to move resources around or buy necessary food. They're more responsible to the people. So in Ethiopia and Sudan, it seems to be more examples of poor governmental planning or purposeful governmental planning to use hunger as a weapon. So war and conflict definitely impacts and worsens it because it creates conditions to exacerbate crop shortages. Armed militants will come in and just steal food. It influences local leaders and warlords to destroy transportation networks, which then destroys the ability to move food from fields to people. And they'll often use hunger as a weapon, as well as preventing any aid or any aid coming in being stolen.
Refugees are another negative outcome of the war and create more conflict in the Horn of Africa. More refugees mean more mouths to feed, and as more refugees come to neighboring countries that are a little poverty-stricken, such as Ethiopia, more food aid is required than the initially sent aid by the humanitarian agencies and the produced amount of food by the country. The 730,000 refugees from South Sudan, Eritrea, and Somalia will soon face chaos as the food aid in stock will be totally consumed by the end of December in 2015, OWO warned. The impending danger of the increase in refugees in Ethiopia and the need to help these refugees requires more funding than what the United Nations expected the requirement would be, and the financial aid cost the Ethiopian government said it need to avert a potential famine was in total approximately $826 million in international assistance.
In addition, the drought in the Horn of Africa was worsened the famine problem in Sudan and Ethiopia. The U.S. Agency for International Development, otherwise known as USAID, on Tuesday announced it is providing nearly $97 million in addition food aid to assist populations in Ethiopia who currently are severely impacted by the El Niño weather phenomenon. People are in desperate need for money to buy food. The name El Niño was chosen based on the time of the year around December, during which these warm waters events tend to occur. The term El Niño refers to the large-scale ocean atmospheric climate interaction linked to a periodic warming in sea surface temperatures across the central and east central equatorial Pacific.
Baka intomuk yawe keo weso o weso ani ewesi hatmichuwa intomuk indo marakisan bakara kabarosim yo.
Early tracking has allowed the situation to be less severe than the famine in 1983 to 1985, which killed more than 150,000 people. However, this is only compared to the total population then. Today's occurrence still is causing major casualties in Ethiopia and other nations in East Africa. U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, has dispatched a Disaster Assistance Response Team, DART, to Ethiopia to help avert a crisis triggered by El Niño. The drought follows successive poor rainy seasons and is one of the worst to hit the country in decades. The DART, an elite team of disaster experts, will provide technical assistance to the government of Ethiopia, conduct humanitarian assessments, and coordinate with the Ethiopian government and humanitarian organizations on the ground to bring vital humanitarian aid, including emergency food assistance, seeds to plant new crops, safe drinking water, and nutrition treatments to those in need. In addition, decline in food production due to the harsh drought led cows to die, which consequently worsened the famine.
Ethiopia's emergency unfolded swiftly as the worst drought in 6 decades saw successive crop failures.
With crops and cattle almost depleted completely and not able to be produced, there is a gradual sequence of decreasing food production to shortage of food. With shortage of food and protein, the famine problem got worse by causing more people, especially children, to get marasmus, kwashiorkor, edema, or other forms of malnutrition and/or health problems due to lack of protein and other important nutrients from food. Marasmus is malnutrition occurring in infants and young children, caused by insufficient intake of calories or protein and characterized by thinness, dry skin, poor muscle development, and irritability. Kwashiorkor is one of the most severe forms of protein malnutrition and is caused by inadequate protein intake. This causes distended stomachs to form as a symptom of kwashiorkor. Edema is a buildup of fluid in tissues causing body parts to swell, usually the ankles and the feet, and a common characteristic of kwashiorkor. Malnutrition is the unhealthy condition that results from not eating enough food or not eating enough healthy food.
Lack of international aid and response is another cause of famine. The projected level of need for emergency aid in Ethiopia has seen a sharp rise from 2.9 million people in early 2015 to 4.5 million people in August and led to 5.2 million people as of mid-October. Aid agencies such as Action Against Hunger has started working in Ethiopia in 1985 to help communities through severe drought and food shortages.
In Ethiopia, USAID is contributing $58 million to its partner Catholic Relief Services for 105,700 tons of U.S. food, providing $19 million to the UN World Food Program (WFP) for its drought relief operation and $20 million for its refugee assistance. Despite what the U.S. aid is doing to help assuage the situation in Ethiopia, the United Nations warned that in 2016, the numbers of people in need may double.
There are not enough men who can harvest due to conflict and war in Sudan and Ethiopia, and the drought occurring there. Because of lack of men who can work on farms, crop production decreases, thus resulting in decrease in food supply. Decline in food supply can ultimately lead to famine. The agriculture sector has been weakened by displacement and violence in many areas, says Layal. If there is no harvest, there will not be food from crops for a full season even if the weapons are put down today. Only those in extreme need get aid, whereas the others who are negatively malnourished but still can live are not provided with food aid.
War and conflict, drought, and lack of international aid have negatively impacted Ethiopia and Sudan by causing famine.
Every day, numerous people are losing their lives or suffering from hunger, while it could have been prevented earlier with faster international aid and a bit of awareness on this topic. We should be aware of this issue because with more awareness of the issue, people would have a better understanding of what is going on globally and what they can do to help others in need.
We should bring awareness to this issue by making a donation to aid organizations such as USAID and Save the Children to allow help to be sent to people in Ethiopia and Sudan, and providing more access to education for people in Ethiopia and Sudan. We should donate to organizations because the donation will be sent to poverty-stricken countries such as Sudan and Ethiopia.
We should provide more access to education for people in Ethiopia and Sudan because education in general, as well as sex education, would help enable the tracking of the entire population, improve individuals' living standards, and allow people to find solutions and better ways to ameliorate the current situation by themselves, such as helpful agricultural methods to grow more maize, a staple food at a quicker speed.